Hey, good morning, y'all. I think there's a handful on here I have never met before. It's kind of exciting. My name is Raymer. Very grateful, recovered alcoholic from Central Texas, and golly, it's good seeing some of y'all. I just, who would have thought at the beginning of all the COVID crap, and when we started these Zoom things, that I would have buddies scattered all over Great Britain, and it just freaks me out like that. And Tina, thank you for bringing some energy. I was laughing like that. The last time I had as much energy as you do, I had just come out of a meth house in East Texas. And no, wait a minute. No, that's another story. But it's just, it's so cool to see y'all. Those two readings are really special to me because they paint this amazing picture of what Bill Wilson and the first 100 intended for us to be leaning into. Notice the dates on them. One is 1942 and the other one's 1966. Bill Wilson was obviously still alive. And the things, when Bill Wilson died in 1971, the Hughes Act in the United States has just been adopted, which kind of put some teeth in the treatment industry, which had an upside and a downside. But it was amazing to watch the statistical stuff of how many people came and got sober and did okay as we progressed from the early 70s to where we are today. And so there's been this real urge in me over the last bunch of years to try to, as gently as I can, present a picture of what I think Bill Wilson and the first 100 intended for us to know and understand about the program. Some of y'all who have been around for a while and are sponsoring people, a lot of people, you'll one of the things that you'll notice is that there's an amazing number of people that have been around for years and years and years in our rooms and still don't know anything about the basic text. This is the reason why I'm such a huge fan of book studies and literature-based meetings. It's like, so who sets the baseline? The nice guy you just met that's sitting next to you in a meeting and he's shooting aphorisms that he's reading off the wall and talking about, just one day at a time, think, just don't drink this. I mean, does he set the baseline or does the text set the baseline? And so unless you're studying the basic text, you'll struggle with that. And you'll do exactly what I did, which is have a little bitty head filled to the brim with aphorisms and one-liners, but still don't know anything about what Bill Wilson and those rascals intended for us to learn about the program. And so for just a bit, I want to talk about that. I need to get this time. I'm so sorry. There. Now I got it. I'm a trained professional. I should have done that. I don't know. Sorry, y'all. I was just getting my time worked out. There used to be an old guy in our home group, the original group I sobered up in, and I stayed there for 7 years until I almost killed myself. And then I went and met some old guys that helped me kind of sort out what was missing in this program. But this guy's name was Horse Jim. Well, I never really knew his whole name. We used to call him Horse. And Horse would always, every time he introduced himself before a meeting, he always did this. My name's Jim. I'm sober today. And he's always looking down, and he always said the same thing. And I don't know, in the words of my buddy Mickey Bush, so's the cat. I mean, as I got involved with the text and I got involved with those directions like this, I began to realize how little I'm sober today helped. It really, go back and look at how many times in the book they talk about, the book says we stayed sober for good and for all. It didn't say we stayed sober one day at a time. That didn't come along until the early 70s after Bill Wilson died. And they started printing brochures and they came out with Living Sober with all of those amazing conflicting pieces of information It's a fascinating study sometimes. If y'all want to grab a copy of that book and look at how many conflicting pieces of information there are between that piece of literature and the big book. The big book says one thing and Living Sober says something completely the opposite. No wonder we stay confused. There was I always tend to want to talk about confusion in AA because it's where we are in a lot of ways like that. We pick up a little piece here and a little piece there, and we kind of cobble it together. And it's okay. Nobody means any harm. But it just, how is it possible that I stayed in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous for almost 7 years and never, ever opened a big book? I didn't work the steps. When I left that group, we had 32 meetings a week. They were all 32 discussion meetings, and all we did. I knew everything personal about everything. I mean, I knew your stories. I knew everything about it like that, but I didn't know anything about a deepening relationship with my creator. I didn't understand anything about how the steps could transform you into somebody that you never dreamed that you could be. I mean, it was absolutely bizarre how off the page I was. And there were hundreds of people there with me doing exactly the same thing. And in my travels worldwide, I've seen the exact same thing. It's geographic like that. It may be that where Young is, there may be a host of a bunch of cool people studying the text and doing things, but maybe not. I've been in places like this in meetings. I travel a lot, and I've been in meetings where I sit there and I'd be kind of looking around the room going, what are these folks talking about? There's a circle triangle on the door. I know I'm in a meeting, but we're not talking about anything that has to do with that. Well, we need a place to share. I completely agree. Totally agree. Listen, it's called a sponsor. Call that rascal. Share about your whatever. I mean, we're burning up a lot of time. The brand new guy that's sitting in the room. I mean, I sometimes, let's pretend Tina just walked into an AA meeting and she's sitting there like this, kind of scratching and looking around, and she's sick as she can be, and she's struggling, trying to figure out what the deal was. And the chair guy goes, okay, who's got the problem today? And then we spend an hour talking about your problems, trying to decide which weed eater you're going to buy. Do you think that Tina gives a fuzzy rat's rear about my weed eater problem? She doesn't. She doesn't. And then, anyway, y'all get my point on this thing like that. There was a theologian. He was not in AA. A guy named D.A. Carson that I used to read a lot of like that. He was he's just a smart, brilliant guy like this. But in a talk that he did, he said something that always caught. He said we drift towards compromise and call it tolerance. And I'm amazed as I look back of how many times we compromise the big picture of what it is that we're doing like this so that we can be friendly and inclusive and blah, blah, blah. You just fill in the blank like that. But the dark side of that, the bottom line is that sometimes we move so far away from the solution that people aren't getting the help that they need. And all you have to do anecdotally is look at the statistical data of the success rates from the early days in AA and watch them crash and burn over the years. I don't know what it's like in Europe, but in the United States right now, there are dozens and dozens of treatment centers that are allowing the patient to pick their recovery path once they get in. So I'm standing in the lobby of a treatment center, shaken, detoxing, not feeling well, and they ask me which path I want to take. Do I want to do smart recovery, rational recovery, AA? They just list this big list. And so I'm going to let the sickest guy in the room pick his recovery path. If this happened one, I'd blow it off and say those people are idiots. But I'm talking dozens of treatment centers that I know of in the United States now. There's no telling how many of them are out there. Y'all understand the problem of that? I mean, I'm going to pick the one that demands the least of me. I don't want to do anything that makes me feel uncomfortable. So anyhow, it's problematic, and So real quick, I want to give you a 5 minute rundown of I I sobered up in January of '88. Uh, Chris, my twin, had sobered up 2 months before I did, and he took me to my first AA meeting. And I fell in love with them. The nicest bunch of people I've ever been around to this day. I love those folks, and we visited a lot, we shared a lot, we laughed a lot, but we didn't know anything about the program. I got a little sicker and a little sicker. It's amazing if you watch a bell curve thing on this thing like this, how many of us will get better and better and better, and then if we don't do the things that we're supposed to do, then we just level off, and then we begin to crash, and then we begin to make 100 excuses of why it is that it's not working the way we thought it was going to work like that. And I've watched untold hundreds of people in AA that have done this. You will always feel better being involved in an AA group, but if that AA group is not doing following some dictates that are in the text, you'll find yourself drifting sideways, and pretty soon you'll get goofy, and then all kinds of stuff gets crazy. I asked my wife one time, we were talking, and I said, when was I the craziest? And she looked at me and she smiled, and she just went, "You're serious? You want?" I said, "Yeah, I'm just curious." And she said, before you met Cliff Bishop, that's right at 7 years sober. She said, you were terrified. The kids were scared. I was completely done. I mean, it's disturbing to walk into a room and your wife is packing a suitcase to move to another town without you, because of your behavior. And I'm thinking I'm that guy that goes, listen, as long as I've got a grip on this Canadian whiskey is my problem. As long as I got a grip on that, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. And everybody around you is going like, no, you're not. No, you're not, like that. So I get rid of the only solution I've ever known, which is booze. The only thing that ever connected dots in me. I've gotten rid of it, and now I'm falling apart. And most of y'all can relate at some point in time, with your own experience or the experience of watching others. So let me, I met Cliff Bishop, who was sponsored by Joe McQuaney out of Little Rock, Arkansas, and Joe and Charlie. Y'all kind of know where this all was going. These are hardline big book guys. I mean, they're not mean, but they're real directed. They're real focused on the text. And I remember Clifford just saying, Myers, if you'll just hang with us for a little while, if you'll stay for a little while, you'll have a different experience, and then you can make a decision based on your experience what you want to do. If you want to go back to your original group or whatever. And that was my original plan. I was going to go back to my homeboys and girls at that original group, and I was going to be an AA stud because I knew what was going on. But I never left. I fell in love with those book study guys, and it just like every week we had two meetings a week studying the basic text, and we had commitments to carry that message to other places every night of the week. We had 52 commitments to carry the message when I moved from Dallas to Central Texas. 52 commitments a week to carry the message other places, and it was a life-changing experience. It never seemed to make sense to me from an intellectual standpoint. Wait a minute. If I go carry a message someplace, it will change how I deal with life. Yeah. I mean, it changed everything on every level. My relationship with my family, and the in some of the conferences that I've been at, there have been a lot of, they always have like an old timer deal where people with 30, 40, 50 years will share for a couple of minutes about stuff like that. And one of the most fascinating things were my conversations with folks. A lot of those people would share this. They'd go, well, I have no idea how I got here. And then they would chuckle a little bit. And I'm going, yeah, I wish they had shared something different, like maybe this is what I did to stay sober for 50 years. But so they forced me at our local conference that now I chair that meeting, and I make sure that that's exactly what we're talking about. But the point is, they all say the same thing, that by the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we had moved away from this written deal where we're looking at the text. We moved towards an oral thing where we just talk about stuff. Well, the problem with that, I mean, if you've ever played that telephone game where I whisper into Young's ear and then he whispers into Texas T's ear, and we just like, and by the time you get down to Tina again, it's a completely different message. That's exactly what's happened in our AA universe over the years. You just have a lot of information and a lot of good intentions, but stuff has drifted. So let me connect a bunch of dots real quick here. Don Pritz, who I always talk about like that. If y'all got any spare time, just sitting around doing nothing, just scratching, and I can either go watch some reruns of Storage Wars on TV, or I can go listen to a talk. Go get some of Don Pritz's old talks. Don sobered up in the federal penitentiary system, and he was an epic dude. I mean, just he had started dozens of book studies in the Denver, Colorado area. He'd start them, build them, and then he'd move on, start another one, get it big, move on, and just like that. It was amazing. But in an old talk that he did, it blew me away. He said, these days we tend to talk more and more. He said, no, I'm concerned because we tend to talk more and more about sobriety and less about recovery. Look at how many times Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob and those cats use the words recovery or recovered in the big book over and over and over again like that. They painted a picture of something that looked completely different than I'm Jim and I'm sober one day at a time. It was a completely different picture. This is the reason why I think sometimes once you become aware of the fact that there is more, some of Mark Houston's old talks from 20 years ago, that he'd always go, y'all, I smell more. And in the early days, it didn't mean anything to me. I didn't understand what he was talking about. But the reality of it is, there is more. If you're finding yourself in a situation, y'all, where you're feeling kind of brittle and dry and kind of drifting sideways a little bit, and most of us have gone through that nightmare like that, and it's an uncomfortable place to be. I want to feel energized and excited about this thing, but go back and start paying attention to what you're doing and not doing. I had an opportunity to work over the years for two different treatment centers part-time, while one was when we were moving our business and the other one was when we sold that business. And I went to work for these guys part-time just for a while, for a couple of years, and one of them for 8 years. They had me working with alumni stuff. And on all these things, they had a script that you would read. And so if I was calling Laura after she got out of treatment, I would just look at my little script list and I'd go, "Hey, Laura, this is Myers from so-and-so treatment center. And let me ask you a couple of quick questions." And then I would ask these questions, and they were always, how many meetings are you going to? How's your IOP going? And there were a couple of others like that. And I always had a problem with it. I always pushed back and asked them if I could rewrite that. And most of the time they would let me do that like that. I think it's important to eventually know about meetings and stuff like this. But in the big picture, if I'm okay and on the page, it's because I'm doing the things that I'm supposed to do. If I am not, then it's because of stuff that I'm not doing. I need to pay attention to it. It's like, what is it that I'm not doing? So if you're struggling and you're having a tough time like that, that's what I'm going to ask you. Tell me what you're not doing that you were doing before. Somebody had sent me a little newsletter. It was a screenshot of a newsletter from Akron, Ohio. And I was reading it and it didn't seem to make any sense. And I wrote the guy back and I said, "Well, I don't get it. What am I?" He said, "Look at the very bottom. And at the very bottom of that page, there was a little thing written at the very bottom, and it said, alcoholics, the only group of people on God's green earth that takes what works and then stops doing it. And I remember reading it. When I saw it, I went, holy, then he nails it. It's the truth, because we do that. We have a tendency to do stuff until the blowtorch gets pulled off our rear end and we kind of settle in. And now I'm okay. I got this. And we watch it and we don't think we'll ever get sick again. I'm still going to listen. I'm at 7 years sober. I'm going to 6 meetings a week. I'm not sponsoring anybody. I haven't read the text, and I'm a suicidal mess. I am literally cannot function. I can't work. My wife, who is far smarter than me, is my business partner. Thank you, God. And she's looking at me going, dude, we can't keep doing this way. You're not showing up at work. You're not doing anything like that. I'm just, you got to figure out what's going on. And that's when I ended up moving and meeting Clifford and Joe McQuaney, and they helped me understand the things that I was supposed to. There's a couple of things I want to talk about real quick that were game changers for me. Most of us kind of have these moments where we go, aha, and we kind of connect up a dot and go, holy, how did I miss that all this time like that? And so one of the things that was maybe the biggest aha moment in my recovery path was this idea that work and self-sacrifice for others was not empty rhetoric that Bill Wilson wrote just to sell books or something. He was giving us sometime when you don't have anything else to do, go read some of the early part of the book and then get over to Working with Others, chapter 7, and look at the first paragraph of chapter 7 and look at how Bill Wilson, he changes the tense from we to you. I mean, he's like he's standing there pointing his finger right at you, and he's going, "You do this, you do this, you do this," and it is important. Look at how many times work and self-sacrifice for others is repeated in the text. It's one of the most reoccurring themes because it's so important. And 36 years later, I still can't connect it up intellectually. Wait a minute. You're telling me that if I go get me a guy to help get through the work and help him, that it'll make my life better? Yeah. Oh, okay. That's the stupidest thing in the world. I mean, I don't understand that. I always thought it was like, if I know enough about recovery, I'll be okay. Or if I, whatever. But it's the truth. The moment Myers got out of his head and quit worrying about 17 employees and how I'm going to pay for all the stuff that we bought and all the other stuff. I mean, there's a million things to worry about. The moment I stopped worrying about that and started worrying about a room full of little drunks and dope fiends that were dying, that needed help. Once I got on that path like that, Joe McQuaney said at a breakfast one time, he said, Myers, he said, one of these days you're going to wake up and you're going to realize that your job in AA, your job in those meetings is to feed, not be fed. And it kind of got me in the fields, because what he was saying was absolutely true. Because I spent all this time, I'm having such a crappy day. I need to go to a meeting. I need to go to a meeting. I need to be fed. I need to wait for somebody to say something that maybe will fix me or whatever the deal is. It's just a big crapshoot. And the reality of it was, the moment I walked into a meeting and immediately started helping people, even if it was setting up tables or trying to do something, just it was a big deal. Let me tell you, I get the pleasure of sponsoring a whole bunch of men today, locally and long distance. But these local guys, one of the very first things I tell them when we're talking about whether I'm going to work with them or not, I always say, I know this is going to sound stupid and it's going to sound kind of mean, but here's the deal. When I'm at a meeting on a Monday night or a Wednesday night, don't approach me and want me to go outside with you and visit, because I'm not going to do it unless you're bleeding, and then I'll come outside for a minute. But other than that, I'm available 24/7. You can call me anytime. You can come by work anytime. I'm available 24/7. But at those meetings, you and me and the other men that I sponsor are going to be focused on new people in that room and what we can do to help make their life different. And some of them get offended. Well, though, that's the time I need to talk to you. No, no, quit. I wave at me across the room and I'll wave it back at you and we're golden. But I'm not going to use that valuable, rich target time to to talk to you about your mother-in-law. It was just not going to happen. The other thing that was an aha moment for me real quick was this idea that step 11 and 12 were optional. It seemed to be painted, and I still see it in my travels, that people paint 12-step work and to a large extent step 11 with as an optional deal. As we get through the work like this, we could either do it or not do it. If I'm too busy, I won't go. It's kind of a weird deal like that. The reality of that, though, is those disciplines of 10, 11, and 12 at the end of the steps are 100% not optional. They are absolutely imperative if you are going to stay in these rooms, if you're going to grow, if you're going to have any kind of a transformational experience. You have to do that stuff. And it the longer you're around, the more you'll see how important that stuff is. Somebody asked me one time, he said, Marge, I don't understand why you talk about that. Almost every talk you do, you talk about that. And I said, the reason I talk about it was because over the years, I've sponsored hundreds, not a couple, hundreds of men who have been in these rooms 17 years, 20 years, 25 years, and don't know anything about the text, and they've never sponsored anybody. And they wonder why their life sucks. They wonder why they're just like walking shells with nothing really going on. And I keep going, y'all, you've got to do this. It's going to change everything. And the experience of that is watching those folks that don't know anything as they begin to learn and as they begin to get one of the funnest things that ever happens to be in AA is watching somebody that's an absolute stand in the corner kind of guy, watch him get involved, and then watch some guy walk over after a meeting one night and say, hey, I wonder if you could help me with some of this work like this. And to look at that guy's face like this, and then to look at him, look at me, and I'm just going, go on. Just you're on the path to heaven if you just keep doing what you're doing like this. And it's just like, if you think you know what you're doing in AA, go sponsor somebody. And the moment that relationship is made, you're going to go, oh crap. Oh crap. I don't know anything about AA. I don't know. And you'll be going, I got to call somebody really quick and find out what to do. But there's nothing cooler than to watch these guys who had no confidence, who had no real peace in their room, watch them transform into something that is absolutely magical. And they are completely different people. I lived that, and a bunch of y'all have lived that same deal, and you know what that's like. If you're struggling still, if you're in this room tonight or this morning, and you still feel like you're drifting sideways somewhat, then get busy. Get busy and see. One of the things that always caught me off guard was that stuff on page 60 to 63 in the U.S. version of the big book like that, where Bill Wilson, from the ABCs to the third step prayer, is 2.5 pages where Bill Wilson introduces us to this idea of the stage character. And I think it's a fascinating exercise for each one of us to do. Go back and read those 2.5 pages. Bill introduces us to this idea that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my problem. He paints this picture of the actor that wants to run the whole show. Go back and read that and see if you can relate. See if you can see you there. And most of us can. Most of us will realize. I mean, every one of us have known people that were spiritual giants in an AA meeting, And then later we find out that he was cheating on his wife and cheating on his employer and doing all this other kind of stuff. I mean, I'm not ragging on anybody. I'm not trying to be mean about it, but there's a difference, and that's what Bill Wilson was trying to get us to see. We can be a train wreck in booze and dope land, but we can also be a train wreck 10 years sober with no booze or dope anywhere in the picture. We can be really, really unhinged, and we see that stuff pretty regularly. But if you'll read those 2.5 pages, you'll either relate to it, you'll go, yep, oh shoot, dang, that's me. I'm that guy. And if you are good, at least you know where you are. At least you know who you are like that. A lot of recovery, a lot of what Don Pritz and some of these earlier guys were talking about was about authenticity. How authentic are we? I mean, it's like, do we give a rat's rear about our own character? Some of us do, some of us don't. As long as I'm sober one day at a time, I'm okay. Okay. But there's more. There's a lot more. And so part of this is just the knowledge. That's just the reason why inventory is so important like that. I'm sponsoring a guy right now that's 12 years sober in the rooms, and he's never done an inventory. And I said, dude, let me ask you a quick question. How do you know who you really are unless somebody helps you see it? He said, well, I'll just think about it in the morning. I go, oh, come on, dude. That's the stupidest thing I've heard, at least in 24 hours. Come on, that you're not going to aware yourself of who you are because you've got a head that's telling whatever story you want to hear. I'm the best guy in the world. My wife is so lucky to have me. I just like this. I can talk myself into anything. And some of y'all have lived that nightmare. And then you do a piece of inventory and you go, wait, stop. Who is this guy? I mean, when Bill Wilson talks about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde like that, I mean, this is, some of us sober are worse than we were when we were out there in booze land. Like it's crazy. And so to have somebody that's willing to help you see this stuff is just it's just an amazing deal. So we want some clarity around it. Once we see who we are, this is the cool thing. If you want to know if you're drifting, read those 2.5 pages. The other thing that I think is amazing, go back and read some promises. The 5th step promises, 9th step, 10th step, 11th step. You go back and read some of these promises and then ask yourself this simple question. Have these manifested in my life? I mean, there it is. I want to read something to you real quick. If you've got a big book right there, I'm flipping over to page 75 real fast. I want to read you there. I want to read you real quick this deal. I'm going to skip down. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. Now, we may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel we're on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. I mean, guys, that's some heady stuff right there. Walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. Read these promises and then ask yourself, have these begun to manifest in my life? If they have, rock on. Listen, if they haven't, rock on. You're still okay. At least you know where you are. On that baseline, you still know where you are. And all it means is I need to double down on my efforts around 10, 11, and 12. And all of a sudden, I'll find myself moving back towards my relationship with my Creator. I'm over the years, I've gotten somewhat amazed and somewhat irritated by how many of us move away from our Creator. We move away from a spiritual relationship with God. And I'm not judging you. I'm not standing on a mountaintop looking, look, you guys, you heathens need to be. I'm not doing that. What I'm doing is that one of the easiest things to get clear of and rid of is the understanding that I must have a contact with God, or this is all going to end up poorly. I'm going to end up in a deal that doesn't work as well as it should like this. And so there was a kid in the meeting one night. I love telling this story. It's real short, but there was a kid in the meeting, and he couldn't have been 19, maybe 20. And he was talking about a conversation that he'd had with his sponsor. And he said, I was talking to my sponsor, and he asked me this question. He said, if God was your girlfriend, would she be happy with how much time you're spending with her? And I remember when he said that like that, I kind of grinned at him. A little bit later, he was talking about God and his relationship with God. He called God Big Homie, which just made me laugh. And he goes, yeah, when I get up in the morning and I talk to Big Homie, and I'm thinking, listen, the dude is one of the most spiritual little kids I ever met in my whole life. He's special times 10. And I thought, this is a good thing. How much time are we spending with our Creator? And do we need to start over? Do we need to kind of reset the path? It'd be a good thing to pay attention to. I can always I'll leave my contact stuff in the chat. And I've got a list of some cool stuff to read. And my buddy Yale Sage in in Dallas, wrote a 40-page deal that you can download and look at like that, of prayers and morning meditations and various things like this. And I'll be glad to send that to you. Also, Bill Wilson said we stood at the turning point. And I think that that's every day. We stand at the turning point, and we get to make hard decisions of whether we're going to follow the disciplines that this program sets up and that sets out, and then follow them, and then watch the transformation. Let me close with this, y'all. I am always happy that I'm sober. I managed to get clear of that stuff for 36 years now, and I love the fact. I am far more elated by the fact that I have a relationship with my Creator, and that my life has been transformed as a result of doing these steps, and then being of service to God's kids. When I look back at my life now as a crusty old guy looking back at his life like that, I'm just kind of blown away by how many blessings and how many times I've seen some amazing stuff. There was a guy in a Bible study one time, and we were talking about miracles, and he said, wait a minute, you said you've actually seen a miracle? And I started laughing like this, and I was just like, I went, I've seen thousands of miracles in these rooms, walking dumpster fires, just complete train wrecks that were transformed because of some simple work that we did with the steps and some discipline to go help somebody and to spend some time with God. It's pretty good stuff. I told him he ought to join AA. Come on, we'll do a Bible study, and then you can come over and join AA. Anyhow, I'm going to quit there, guys. Y'all, I love y'all, and I appreciate y'all all showing up. It's a delight to see you. Thanks, Young.